All right. Welcome, everyone. June 17th, 2025, Bond Oversight Committee meeting. I'm going to go first off with the roll call. Alfonso Lopez, present. Gina Blackman-Taylor,
Here remotely.
remotely. Thank you, Gina. Robert Gertison.
Present.
Sally Accord. Absent. No, she's not online either. Okay. Jessica Allen.
Going back to the freezer.
All right, carrying on, Mr. Jessica Allen? Not here. David Flatt.
Present.
David Filippo.
Present.
Margarita Gamboa Harris. Absent. Byron Goins.
Present.
Thank you, Byron.
Remote.
Remotely. Nakia Jackson Hale.
Present.
Thank you, Nakia. Walter Jones.
Present.
Remotely. Thank you, Walter. Stephen Silbercross. Not here. Miss Yvette Williams.
Present.
And Emily Stevens, our Board of Trustee Liaison.
Here.
Thank you, Emily. All right. We do have a quorum. Let's all please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Well, actually, I'm gonna add you during the agenda, since I'm gonna do Chris. All righty. Moving on to 2.0, approval, no, I'm sorry, adoption of the 1.02, adoption of the agenda. I have a couple of additions here. We are going to add 2.03C as part of the topic of today's agenda. We're also adding two appointees that were not here or not on this list that I could roll call. Ms. Chris G., she's been appointed by Brenda Zamora, the trustees Brenda Zamora, and we also have Mr. James Halsey that's also present. I need that added into the record, their presence, since their names were not on the roll call. All righty. Moving on. 2.01, approval of the minutes. I'll give you guys each a few minutes to read over the minutes, and once you guys have looked at them and see any mistakes or anything, let me know, and we'll see about approving last month's minutes.
I'm sorry, did we move to adopt the agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's please, let's go back to 1.02 with the added additions that I put in with Chris G., Jim Halsey, and 2.03. I need to have a motion on the floor to adopt today's agenda.
I motion to adopt today's agenda.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yvette Williams seconds.
We have also a second for Ms. Williams. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Now, on to 2.01, my apologies, approval of the minutes. So I'll give
I'll make-
everyone,
oh, I'm
go
sorry.
unless you want to go ahead. Go ahead, Ms.
I'll
Williams.
make a motion to approve once everyone's had a chance to.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Dave Flatt for the second.
Mr. David Flatt with the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, we're on to 2.02, election of executive committee. I guess we'll have to open up the floor for nominations for the executive committee. Chair, first vice chair, and second vice chair are on the table.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Ms. Blackman Taylor for chair.
We have a motion on the floor to nominate Ms. Blackman Taylor for Chair for Bond Oversight Committee. Do I have a second?
I would recommend that you take several motions, allow for public comment, and then
So-
take each motion.
For each
For vote.
position, get public comment, is what you're saying?
Say that again?
Ask public comment for each position? Is what you're saying?
Right, so go ahead and get the nominations for the respective positions in the seconds, open it up for public comment, and then take a vote.
Gotcha, okay. All right, currently we have a motion on the floor for Ms. Blackman Taylor to be chair. Do I have a second? Hearing none,
I thought we were going to have.
Now, I'm
discussion.
sure how that indicates support, but I can second my own nomination. I accept the nomination.
can she second her own nomination? Legal?
She can second it
Okay.
and put it up for vote.
Gotcha, okay.
Chairman?
We have a first nomination for Ms. Blackman Taylor to chair, and we have a second for Ms. Blackman Taylor, by Ms. Blackman Taylor. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Byron Goins.
I'd like to support Ms. Blackman as well.
Okay. We already have a first nomination and a
Okay.
second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goins. Is there any other discussion with Ms. Blackman Taylor or Ms. Gina Blackman as vice chair? Is this where I ask
I'd
for the
like
public?
to-
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. Sorry. Since we're having discussion, I want to give my reasoning for nominating Ms. Blackman Taylor. She has been, since I've been on the board, she preceded me, or I guess a few years before me, but I have watched her over the years, and she has always demonstrated such a high level of professionalism. She follows through on her assignments. She always makes sure that this committee is informed and knowledgeable about her meetings. She served as community liaison, so I know I have big shoes to fill, but she has always, in her role, running our meetings, has always done such a fabulous job of running our meetings as well. And I think that she will do a fantastic job as we move, well, I don't know how to word this, forward with our bond, especially with the changing of the bylaws, engaging with our Board of Trustees more. There's a lot coming by way of the master plan that Brandon's team is working with, and I strongly believe that Ms. Blackman Taylor will be a great leader for us as chair. So those are my reasons for nominating her, but this is the second time I nominated her. A year ago, I did too.
Thank you, Yvette. I appreciate those kind words. They mean a lot.
You're welcome.
Are there any other nominations for first chair?
I'd like to,
For chair.
I'd like to nominate, Al Lopez for chair.
We have a nomination for chair for Al Lopez on the floor.
And I'll second that, Dave Flat.
We have a second from Mr. David Flatt. Is there any discussion about the nomination for Al Lopez? I would just like to speak on behalf, and also Ms. Gina Blackman. She's been totally phenomenal, as so is I. We've both been very involved on this board for years, multiple years. Our presence is always here. We've always been professional about what we've done. I know there was some sour grapes about not attending some meetings recently, but the reality is we were out of compliance, and that was the sole reason for us not having these meetings. That's just plain and simple the way it is. I didn't want to bring everyone to meet up when we were completely out of compliance, since we did not meet the recommendations through our bylaws for having children in the district. So it was clear that we weren't clearly out of compliance. So that was the sole reasoning for not having these meetings. But I'm not going to take anything from Gina. She's done a phenomenal job. I feel like I've been just as involved, just as professional, just as attentive to all these. We've spent multiple hours on our own time doing what we need to do as these executive positions require at times. And I feel like I do have one more year left on my term according to the bylaws, and I would like to move forward on doing that. There'll be time for any of the executive board if they want to step it up after I've fully served, and I will continue to do whatever I got to do. So no matter what decisions you guys make today, it's been a pleasure. But just wanted to give you the reasoning why there's additional nominations here, which normally there isn't. These are usually pretty smooth and quick, but there seems to be some rumblings as to why this is happening. So just wanted to put that on the record. Unless there's any other discussions, does anyone else have something to say? Ms. Williams?
Thank you for indulging me. Not to take anything away from you, Mr. Lopez, as a chair. You were our vice chair previously, so I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any other discussion for the second nomination of chair for the Bond Oversight Committee? Or are there any other nominations for vice chair? I should always ask. For chair, for chair. I don't know why I keep saying vice chair, but for nominations for chair for the Bond Oversight Committee. Hearing
Well,
none.
and I can, I mean, in terms of a conversation, I do want to say, and I'm sorry, this was a long-planned family vacation. Otherwise, I would prefer to be there in person. But I do want to thank Yvette for the nomination and Byron specifically for the support. I know we have, this is not about Al in terms of, I enjoy working with Al. I feel like we have made a good team. My willingness to kind of step forward and accept that nomination has a lot to do with what I see as coming down the pike. We have a lot of, between, as Yvette said, between the master planning with the bylaws and some other elements that are on our way. We just have a lot that are about to hit our plate. And I would like the opportunity to engage with that, manage that, and push this committee forward to the place where I feel like it wants to go. So, but no, this is, I enjoy working very much with Al.
Thank you, Gina. Is there any other discussion pertaining to the two nominations of chair that we have on the table currently? Hearing no discussion, so legal, do we do this one at a time?
Walter raised a hand.
Go ahead, Walter, sorry.
Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I think you and Al will do a great job together.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any opinions or discussion when it comes to the two nominations for chair for the Bond Oversight Committee? Hearing none, legal, how do we proceed now?
Public comment, and then you take the first motion and the second motion if the first doesn't pass.
Thank you. Is there any public comment pertaining to the two chairs that have been nominated for Bond Oversight Committee? Hearing none. We're going to go to the first nomination, which is Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor. All those in favor to make Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor chair of the Bond Oversight Committee, please say aye.
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 Do I need to take a roll call? Because
Aye.
I believe you should, yes.
okay. All right, Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Rob Gerdison,
Aye.
Sally Accord. Hearing none. Jessica Allen. David Flatt.
No.
David Filippo.
No.
Margarita Gamboa Harris. Byron Goins.
Aye.
Nakia Jackson Hale.
Aye.
Walter Jones.
Aye.
Stephen Silbercross. Not here. Yvette Williams.
Aye.
Okay, I have 6 votes for aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Chris G? No? And Mr. Halsey?
No.
Okay, I still have 6 votes for Gina Backman Taylor. I'm not sure what is the, today's quorum that we have here?
Yeah, I believe it's 5 to 6.
Six would be, that's what I have. I have six votes. So, since she's got 6 votes, does that mean she wins? Okay. All right, then there's no point in going to the other nominations. Okay. All right. We have 6 in favor of Ms. Gina Backman Taylor being, chair and 5 nays, so a motion carries. So congratulations, Ms. Gina Blackman Taylor. You are the chair of the Bond Oversight Committee. Moving on to vice chair, first vice chair. Do we have any nominations for first vice chair?
Nakia Jackson Hale. I'd like to nominate Chris G. for vice chair.
We have a nomination for Chris G. for vice chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Halsey for Chris G. to be first vice chair. Do we have any other nominations for first vice chair? I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Gertison. I know that he recently moved on as 3rd vice chair, but I think it'd be nice to have him move up to 2nd vice chair. I've worked with him over the years, and he's brought a lot to this committee. So out of that laborer of love, I'd like to nominate Mr. Gertison for 2nd vice chair, if he will
Okay.
accept that.
Yes, thank you.
Or am I saying it right? No, 1st vice chair.
First
I'm
vice
sorry,
chair.
1st vice chair, I stand corrected. Yvette Williams.
We have a nomination for first vice chair for Rob Gertison. Do we have a second?
I will second that. This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record.
We have a second by Ms. Gina Blackman Taylor for first vice chair, Rob Gertison. Are there any other nominations for first vice chair? Any other nominations for first vice chair? Any other nominations for first vice chair? Hearing no, we have 2 candidates. We will go to Ms. Chris G. first, since she was first nominated. I need votes now to vote for Ms. Chris G. for first vice chair. And I will,
Public comment before.
oh, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment when it comes to first vice chair? Any public comment? Hearing none. We are going to go on to the motion. There's a motion on the table for Chris G. to be first vice chair. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm gonna have to do this again. Wow, that sounded like more than 6, did it? All right, I'm gonna go through this again. Gina Blackman Taylor, Chris G., first vice chair.
Nay.
Nay? Okay. Robert Gertison.
Aye.
Wait, did Rob just vote for Chris G?
You voted for Chris G. for first vice chair.
Oh,
Do you want to vote for Chris G.? Would you like to vote for Chris G. for first vice chair? That's the same position that you just nominated for.
Or are you voting for Chris? For first vice chair?
If Rob wants to support Chris, I will support that decision. I just want to be clear.
you can skip me.
Okay. All right. We have one over so far. Sally Atchford, she's not here. Jessica Allen. David Flatt. Margarita Gamboa Harris.
You skipped me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. David Filippo.
Aye.
Mr. Byron Goins.
Aye.
Nakia Jackson Hale,
Aye.
Walter Jones,
Aye.
Stephen Silvercross, Yvette Williams,
Well, since my buddy, Mr. Gertison, kind of withdrew, I vote yay, because I was going to nominate her for second vice chair anyway. So, just moving the chairs
Okay,
around.
that is 7 votes. That's enough to carry first vice chair. Congratulations, Chris, your first vice chair. Okay, moving on to nominations for second vice chair for the Bond Oversight Committee.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Gertison for second vice chair. Are you going to accept this one? You going to vote for yourself? Okay.
We have a nomination for second vice chair for Rob Gertison. Do I have a second?
Nakia
This is
Jackson
Gina
Hale
Blackman
for the
Taylor. I
record.
will second.
Public comment. We need to do public comment.
Before the,
These are just the nominations, so nominations, deliberation, public comment, then vote.
I'd like to put in the name of Al Lopez for second vice chair, if you wish that one.
yes, absolutely. Is there a second nomination for Al Lopez for second vice chair?
I'll second that. Again.
Thank you, Mr. Halsey. So now we have, is there any other nominations for second? Someone needs to mute their, Walter. Mute, Walter. Thank you. We have 2 nominations for second vice chair, Mr. Rob Gerson, Mr. Al Lopez. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, is there any public comment when it comes to the 2 nominations for second vice chair for the Bond Oversight Committee? Hearing none. Okay, we're going to go to you first, Mr. Gerson. Gina Blackman Taylor.
Yep.
You vote. The
This-
nominations for Rob Gerson is on the floor to vote.
Apologies, Rob, with Al coming in, I would like to see him continue on the executive committee, so I am going to vote nay.
No offense taken.
All right,
I
Mr. Rob,
figured you would understand.
Mr. Rob Gerson.
Al Lopez for second, so.
Okay, so you're voting no
No.
for yourself then? Okay. Sally Accord. Jessica Allen. David Flatt. Oh, the nomination right now on the floor is for Rob Gerson, so.
Nay.
Nay. David Filippo.
Nay.
Margarita Gamboa Harris. Mr. Byron Goins.
Nay.
Nakia Jackson Hale.
Nay.
Walter Jones.
Nay.
Stephen Silvercross. Yvette Williams.
Nay.
Okay, we're going to go on to the second motion. That one failed. So the second motion is for Al Lopez to be second vice chair. Ms. Gina Blackman Taylor.
Aye.
Robert Gertison.
Aye.
Sally Accord. Jessica Allen. Mr. David Flatt.
Aye.
David Filippo.
Aye.
Margarita Gamboa Harris. Mr. Byron Goins.
Aye.
Nakia Jackson Hale.
Aye.
Walter Jones.
Aye.
Stephen Silvercross. Ms. Yvette Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. There's 7 votes there, so motion carries to make Al Lopez second vice chair for the Bond Oversight Committee. Is there any public comment or anything pertaining to what we just did? Or, okay, moving on. So officially, Ms. Gina Blackman Taylor, you will be chair. Ms. Chris G, first vice chair, and Alfonso Lopez will be second vice chair moving forward. So since she is remotely, does she take over from?
It is customary for the chair to continue through the meeting, but it's up to your discretion.
Ms. Gina?
For Al to continue through the meeting.
Correct, that's what's being suggested
Yeah,
at this point. You're
that's-
good with that?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, Gina. That'll work. Moving forward. Let's see. That was 2.01. We are on to 2.03, Bond Oversight Committee Bylaw Review. We're going to leave this open to discussion. We did have some points here that Gina worked tirelessly to put these points together to kind of help the flow of these points of view to update, change, whatever you want to do with the bylaws, whatever this committee chooses to do. This is in your handout here. Let's see, Gina, since you're more familiar with this, I'll let you, if there's any points that you wanted to put out forward, since you put more time into this, is there some valid points you want to make priority, or I'll let you open this up for discussion?
Sure. Let me know if you
I have
guys
a
don't.
question
hear me.
from Ms. Williams. Go ahead.
I can't hear her, so if you could repeat the question.
I'm sorry, Vet Williams. I was just clarifying that with it being 22 pages now from our, I think, 4 or 5 pages, I'd like to see us go through the entire bylaws by section.
So that I do want to propose that we start with the original bylaws. One of the things that the executive committee had talked about was that clearly having this extensive of a change was not what the Bond Oversight Committee was wanting to move towards. This version was included in the agenda because it was this update was included in the agenda because it was the most recent update that we had made. But one of the things I would like to propose is, in order to simplify conversation, target it to the things that I think are most urgently needed, is to return to the original bylaws with, we had some conversation points that we thought would move the conversation forward more expediently. So I can go through those unless people want to revisit this revised version that I think the main thing is that I don't see that there was any support for sort of changing the liaison roles, and with pending government operational changes from the Board of School Trustees, that it was not necessary for us to hash out that language until they changed their governance policy.
Do we have any other discussion or opinion on this? Go ahead, Ms. Nakia Jackson.
Nakia Jackson Hill for the record. I just had a question about where these bylaws originated from. Did they originate from this committee, the trustees, the school district? Like, where did these originate from?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris G., but these were put together back nearly 30 years ago where they originated. If you'd like to add to that.
Bylaws were quite a while ago. This newer version, I believe, came from former liaison Lola Brooks. I haven't been able to go back and forth to measure how much, but I'm not sure if Ms. Blackman was able to weigh in on that, but I know that you had one discussion as a bond committee a couple months ago, and no action was taken at that time. And so I think what the first vice chair is suggesting makes sense, is to go back to the original and then see what's working or not working there. This committee and audit, I believe, are the only two committees that are run by bylaws. Everything else in the district is done by policy. And so I'm curious, I don't even know the history of why it's done that way. Bylaws are less flexible than policy can be. And I'm going to suggest that as we move through this, maybe that's the change that we make a recommendation on, and then really look at the mission statement and the guidelines that come into play, because there's no wording here, for example, that this committee should weigh in or assist Brandon or his team with the facilities master plan that's going to be coming about. You should have some say as a bond council where that might come from. So there just may be some things that work-wise make better sense now. And I'm not sure, I'm not tied up one way or another on a bylaws, but I made notes on mine of places where I think you lost a lot of your authority to some extent, and I don't want to see that happen, because it's a pretty good functioning committee, you have been. So I guess as the first vice chair is recommending, we would work off of the old bylaws and then input, and maybe you put a work group together or something along those lines, or the executive committee takes what everybody says today and brings it back to this board at a later date, just as a suggestion.
So as a follow-up, I think that was kind of my concern, that a lot of the changes were from old trustee leadership. We have kind of a new board in place, and I know that the trustees are still working like through some of their governance changes. And so I know people probably don't want to hear this, but I mean, I think that it maybe requires us maybe starting over, as Gina has recommended.
I have a point of order.
Hold on, Mr. David Filippo, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
just question. I'm new to the board, so I apologize for that. I don't know the history. I would assume that the bylaws were created by the trustees originally, so I'm not sure how we have the authority to change their direction. So, and maybe we do, but
As a board, the only authority we have is just give recommendations to the trustees. They're the
and
they're
then
the
they
ones
would
that have the
approve
final say.
they would
so-
approve the bylaw changes.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So, Ms. Gina?
So maybe given how many new people we have, I think maybe it is helpful to give that full context. The Bond Oversight Committee, as a part of our bylaws, has a yearly review. To that end, that review has been fairly straightforward. Last year, with our liaison role, Christy is absolutely correct, that it was a sense that we were not in compliance with governing policy as stated in the Board of School Trustees, specifically their board policies GP 14 and GP 15, which are the context of a lot of those changes. The executive board at the time, which was Al, myself, and Chad Conrad, worked with Lola to revise certain versions of this, and the main target of that policy of GP 14 was the feeling that the liaison roles were not in compliance with Board of School Trustees governance policy, which was why the actions that were listed under the liaison roles were put into other places. That's why there were so many extensive changes, was trying to accommodate what some of those aspects were and putting them into a different place. However, with the fact that bond oversight, the Board of School Trustees has changed greatly and has indicated a desire to review their governance policies, it's my feeling that we can, at the very least, pause that more in-depth conversation when it comes to particularly the ways in which the liaison roles work, and sort of leaning on the language of GP 14, which says that board committees are to support the board in doing its job, not to help or advise the staff. So long as these liaison roles do not help or advise staff, but instead use their position to assist the Bond Oversight Committee in being more robust in covering all of the territory that Bond Oversight is supposed to carry, I feel as if there is a window for which these liaison roles still comply with GP 14, and that there isn't a need, particularly with Christy and Fred Smith and others very graciously came and gave their time in public comment, talking about the reasons why liaison roles were created in the first place. So in terms of bylaws, we also looked at a lot of the, so audit committee, but AZAC also has bylaws. That's the other committee, Christie, that runs through bylaws. So a lot was also looked at their bylaws to see if there were ways that we could match what they were doing so that these different committees were sort of cohesive in approach. My suggestion, barring, and then the one other question about whether or not we have the authority to change the bylaws. The Board of School Trustees is, as Al said, the ultimate authority or approval. They can change it even without our consultation. However, there is a role that bond oversight plays in our bylaws that recommend changes. And so my feeling is that if we move forward, we are able to approve a version of the bylaws that is acceptable to our committee as a whole. I would imagine that the Board of School Trustees would take those recommendations. Back when we weren't meeting, one of the things that we urged, that we were looking to see if we could accomplish, was having the Board of School Trustees alter the bylaws to the subject matter that was preventing us from meeting, which was specifically that requirement about having children or grandchildren in the district. So my proposal for kind of those wins that we can have right now with this bylaws. Now, whether or not we go to policy, Chris, that's not something that we've considered before. So I don't know what the process would be towards eliminating bylaws completely and making it a policy-based thing or not. But the list of things that I had, there are small grammar and wording adjustments throughout the bylaws that I think can be made with very little sort of debate. One of them is that as an example, under the community liaison role, there's a description of a committee and it's called the AB 235 committee, I believe, or 435. That refers to a bill that doesn't even apply to that committee name anymore. So just changing that name from the AB 435 committee, 353 panel, to what it actually is. And then other little grammar changes or wordings, just things that were plural that shouldn't have been plural. The second thing was either removing or limiting the child requirement, either not making it mandatory and removing that as a staff responsibility, to kind of maintain that everyone on the board has a child or grandchild, or half, making it 25% or removing that mandatory implication at all. Wanting to add in specific mechanism for reporting to the Board of School Trustees. So that was something that I think is very important, that because it was a practice in the beginning, but is no longer a practice, creating a mechanism in our bylaws by which we prompt a quarterly review became, I think, more important when we saw how little of the work that we were doing was really making its way up all the way to the decision makers. And then the final thing that I thought would be an easier add would be adding that appendix with those relative policies. So one of the things that I think that's a really big responsibility of Bond Oversight Committee is looking at those policies and how we fit into within that policy language and our ability to make recommendations on changing policies. But if we're not aware of what policies have an impact on our work, having it in one place, specifically in our bylaws, was a good addition, and that was taken directly from the AZAC agenda bylaws.
Thank you, Gina. Mr. Jim Halsey?
Yeah, can we just have a motion to table this item until maybe next month? There's 3 new members on the board, and it was last changed in 2013, so I don't think there's a big rush to change it. Let's try to get it right. That'd be that's my motion.
I have a motion on the floor to table this until next month.
Second.
I'd like to have a discussion.
I have a second. on the floor to table this till next month. Now we're open for discussion. Ms. Yvette Williams.
I have a real issue with that because we've been dealing with these bylaws for, almost 2 years now. And there's always a reason to keep putting this off. I'd at least like us to move forward with a discussion today. Let's review the bylaws that we have before us so that we can then, perhaps at our next meeting, vote on our recommendations for the board. But to keep putting this off is just, it's becoming egregious, in my opinion, of this committee's task.
Is there any more discussion? We have a motion and a second to table this till next month. Is there any more discussion
Yes.
on the motion? Go ahead, Ms.
Nikia Jackson Hill, for the record, can we at least consider the changes that Gina has recommended? I think some of them, she said, are minor grammatical errors. I don't mind discussing adding the appendix so that we can move forward with some changes, but an overhaul on the bylaws. Given that we do have new members that have not had a chance to review these items, I don't think that it's inappropriate that maybe we make those small changes and then move forward with a greater discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Comment as well. First, you're right, Gina, AZAC does have bylaws. David had just corrected me on that, so thank you. I would say we should probably use this opportunity for discussion still to continue and then not act on it, so maybe the motion could be set aside while we at least find out what points there could be for changes based on what Gina was going through. For example, I like the idea of not more than 11 members versus 15. The non-voting trustees will earn voting status, I think, within 2 years, but I can't remember what the effective date. Is that correct? Okay. And so we should anticipate that section will be changed on how the appointments will come into play. So for future reference, as far as that's concerned, I like the idea of working off of the original bylaws rather than reacting to what was proposed. And then I would love to hear from you all, what's working, what isn't, where is there information that you need to clarify so that you can ask for information, what those guidelines are. But I totally agree, we don't manage staff, and we should be sensitive to making sure not to add burdens to their workday. So I think I would like to hear some of the information pieces that you have all dealt with over the last couple of years of what's working, what isn't, where should you clarify. Like I pointed out, I think there should be a reference to the master plan, the facilities master plan, and your voice should weigh in on that at some point in time. There's no reflection of that part of it, for example. I agree that the 353 committee is not appropriate. That was my law, and that was actually for the facility, the State Bond Oversight Facilities Committee, not this committee. So that reference should go away as well, just for food for thought.
Ms. Yvette Williams.
Yes, I have some suggestions as well, or some areas that I think we need to address as well in here, and I'd like to have that opportunity to share those as
Okay.
well.
Right now,
Once
we do.
Once Ms. Blackman
We do
has
have
had a
a,
chance
we do have
to.
a motion and a second on the floor. To get into the discussion, we'll have to see how this motion carries. So a vote on the floor, a motion and a second has been put on the floor to table this till next month.
Are we still in discussion?
We are in discussion. Ms. Williams is bringing up topics if this fails.
I was offering discussion.
Mr. Chair, maybe to you, to Mr. Halsey as the maker of the motion, would you mind setting that aside while we complete the discussion component? And then you may not need your motion, but at least we know it'll be taken back up at a later time.
Absolutely. I was
Okay.
ready to accept your amendment to my motion to continue discussion on the subject because I know it's a spirited debate that needs to happen, but I just think with the added new members that we should take the time to get it right. So I will accept that amendment.
And the person that second, do they also?
I'll remove my second.
Thank you. So since the motion is now off the table, we are back open to discussion. Ms. Blackman, did you want to say something, or go ahead, Ms. Williams, you had the floor.
No,
actually.
my point was, while we were discussing that we had set aside this meeting specifically to have a robust conversation about this. So if we're not discussing the merits of that particular motion, then I'm fine with moving into a more general conversation.
So the floor is open to discuss bylaws at this point, then, how we want to move forward. Or if you have suggestions, I kind of agree with Ms. Hale to get some valid points, at least something on the floor for the trustees, some of the main points, and then we could always add to it. It's not like we're locked into just giving one recommendation one time at the trustees and it's over. This is obviously something that's going to take time. But like I say, I think the floor should be open to any suggestions at this point, what we want to recommend to the trustees, if anything. So the floor is open to anyone that wants to say anything pertaining to changes of bylaws. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Okay, there were a couple things, and I'm glad we're going at this route with our old bylaws rather than confusing the whole discussion with all of this other stuff that has gone on previously. So looking at the bylaws, under Article 2 purpose for item number G, so that would be Article 2, Section 1, item G. I'd like to include in here to do those special inquiries or studies and presentations. That's either requested by the Board of School Trustees or district staff, and I think it should also include or Bond Oversight Committee, because we have had those instances on more than one occasion where we wanted to learn more, whether that be a best practice nationally or some of us on this board may be aware of in our own areas of expertise. But because it wasn't in the bylaws, we were not able to have those presentations. So I'd like to definitely make sure that we have that in there. And then on going to Ms. Blackman-Taylor's point, Article 3, Section 1, Section 2, no, I'm sorry, Section 3, removing that 50% of the membership. So I don't know if there's an appetite just to remove that in general, or just restate that. And I don't know if you all want to go with a percentage or not, but we definitely need to take a look at that, because that held us up from 4 months of work, because we did not have the makeup of our membership, and so we were not allowed to meet. I would also like to have a discussion on our membership as well, given what I witnessed at our last board trustee meeting last week. One of the other committees had their bylaws up for review, and I noticed in there that they had a restriction if you have a contract with CCSD in construction. You know, if you have a construction contract, that you not be allowed to serve on this board. I think that's real important, because, you know, we don't want that kind of a conflict where we're having someone vote because it impacts their bottom line. So I think that's important that we consider that as well. And then on Article 4, Section 3, I'd like to add a Section 4, reporting to the Board of Trustees at a regular school board public meeting, at least, and I think we need to discuss a minimum, whether that's semi-annually or is that going to be quarterly. And I think we also have to be very careful to also make sure that our chair has the opportunity to have additional communication outside of that public report to the board. I think that's important too, because we have had those instances come up as well. And I think having a liaison on our board is helpful, but one of the problems we have struggled with on this committee, not going to, I know you're going to be here regularly, you're very much engaged, but we have had where our liaison just hasn't been participating, and the feedback from our meetings is not getting translated to the entire Board of Trustees. So some of us do a much better job with communicating with our trustee, but not all of us are appointed by our trustee. So, you know, in fairness. And so I think it's important that our chair has the opportunity to to have discussions with the Board of Trustees, even if that's in a separate meeting about something, or for some direction, some guidance on some of this, you know, in an advisory role. Other than that, I think that was all that I pretty much had, yeah, because I think now that we're going back to this one instead of the other. So that was it for me. Thank you.
Go, Ms.
Question,
Stevens?
go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to address two things on there that I think would be helpful as you guys are moving forward and making your recommendations. I don't know if anybody, and I am sorry for those that stepped up to the dais today, so you probably have not. But for the rest of us, I don't know if we've gone through this redlined version that's 22 pages long, but I have. And there are some things in here that are really good and some things maybe not so good, right? But when I went through it, one of the things that is in there is a reporting mechanism. It literally says in here, it was an addition that was made, that maybe you put it in the bylaws where there is a reporting mechanism. It's more organized way of saying these are our recommendations. I know you're probably comparing it to AZAC, where AZAC will come in and present sometimes, but that's usually because they're presenting on something that the board actually has to vote on. In these situations, I think you're making, from what I've seen from the spirit, if you would, of the bond oversight, is to make recommendations to the board, not necessarily items that are being voted on. So if that's the case, then maybe, I don't know that a presentation is necessary, but definitely having some sort of mechanism for your recommendations, I think would be super helpful, and it is in this red line version. And so that's just something to think about as you're doing this. And then the other thing that you mentioned was the training and the onboarding. In the back of this red line version, it actually gives, and this is in accordance to our policy, where it talks about the role of the trustee liaison. And I'm going to shoot myself for actually bringing this up because it's just going to give me more work. But it says on pages 18 and 19, it talks about what my role would be to be more engaged and be more responsible as a liaison between you and the board of trustees. It would to ensure that the training that you're talking about and the onboarding that is required for new bond oversight members are getting that training, they're getting that information, and that would be my responsibility to make sure that that is available to you. And I think that that's a very fair ask, and I think that it's the right thing to do, that you know, if I'm working closely with the executive committee on what the needs are of the members of this committee, then we're getting you that training. Some of that training could include, and this is, again, just up to you guys to make these recommendations, but maybe it's how our bidding processes work and those types of things. So just to kind of put that out there, these are things that, that you mentioned that I think are great. Some of it's already in this red line version if you go through it, and you can pick out things that you like and you don't like. But I would definitely take a look at it because there is some good stuff in there that I think could be helpful according to what you're talking about.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chair,
Ms. Stevens.
comment? Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I think that's very, very important. Like on page 17, under section 3, the third paragraph, I think it outlines how we would report to the trustees. I think that's good language to have process-wise. So I would suggest to whomever's taking notes on this that we keep alignment with that. The reason I like the 11 versus 15, number one, that gets unwieldy, but at some point there will be 11 trustees that we will be working with. So maybe we just keep that in the back of our mind as we look through the process. So a lot of language won't be necessary, but you'll need to keep it for now until that piece comes into play. So just make sure we transition as far as that's concerned. I do think, let's see, I think on your list, on G, on page 2 in the current bylaws, I would add someplace, G, maybe it's just construction including safety, because I do think there's no reference to people that deal with construction safety like OSHA and things along those lines, and it probably might make sense to add something along those lines. I do agree Section 3, the 50% membership, I think I just delete it. It was well-intentioned whenever it came about, but it's restrictive to how a board member can function. Just like I don't agree that in the redlined one, that they wanted to require everybody had to be a registered voter. That's for what purpose? That's not your purpose on this. So that made it political without talking about telling you shouldn't be involved in politics. So I think getting rid of, making sure we don't add that back into the other one. And then maybe someone can explain, are there reports that are done that are revisions that we have access to? Is that how staff then gives, because there was a discussion of the objectives of the bond committee are to advise, but what recommendations or revisions are provided then? Is that standard to staff? Do you provide this committee revisions on capital improvement, revisions on facilities changes? Is that part of your roles? Is that given to this committee then?
Yeah, Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Yeah, so customarily, we just brought revision 6 forward. Revision 5 was brought forward. So all revisions to the CIP are brought to this committee before recommending to the trustees. So yeah, that is a very deliberate and a successful attribute of what this committee does.
Okay. And then to Gina, do you work with the facilities master plan? I know the board's just now taking that up, the facilities master plan. What role does bond oversight have in that, if any?
So with the capital improvement plan, it started with capital improvement plan 5. Byron had appointed Rob and I to work with facilities in an informal way where we helped make, where we attended more meetings in order to help facilitate some of those questions way back in CIP 5. And the result of that sort of early collaboration was that we had a more, at the time, the most robust kind of sort of public format that we had with CIP 5, as well as that ability to communicate more fully to the Bond Oversight Committee, the context of a lot of the decision-making that had happened. And as well, in that case, we were actually brought to the the Bond Oversight Committee actually attended the Board of School Trustee meeting where we more fully explained the conversation that had happened at the public Bond Oversight Committee meeting. When it came time for this facility master planning process, Al, again, had Rob and I as a part of the master planning group. I'm going to get all the initials wrong. I'm sorry. Brandon can help me out. But where we are doing the same things, where we are attending some of these meetings, where we are just one part of the larger conversation that is happening. Neither of us are part of one of the strategic groups. And then I know that some of our Bond Oversight Committee members have attended the open community forums. So we have that information. We have not more formally presented any of that to the Bond Oversight Committee. So it's an informal committee situation.
Thank you. Then I think we should ponder that. I think there should be an actual role for at least one person from this board to participate and bring back that information back and forth. So however that might come about in language. And then on page 1 of the old bylaws, letter, what do I have? Oh, letter C, we provide financial, bond, and investment oversight? That just seems strange to me. Do we do that? And if so, fine, but is it necessary?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Yeah, customarily, members of the committee have met with our facilities and bond fund financial representatives, and the most recent one was Chad Conrad, a chief financial officer for a resort casino. So he had that financial acumen, was able to talk with the appropriate staff member about what those aspects were. But it is a rare skill set.
Okay. So then maybe that should stay. Do we have any liaison work with the audit committee, for example?
Brandon McLaughlin, no formal role. But
Just something to ponder. I'd like to hear what people think. But sometimes there's audits that are done on, I don't know, by department, facilities. I'm not sure how the district does it. But if it's something that affects or impacts facilities, CIP, that type of thing, maybe that should be listed as something that, for information purposes. Just food for thought.
Yeah, high level, the audit advisory is meant to provide additional voices to the audit conducted by the third-party auditors hired for it. They're not conducting the audits, but, so the overlap is just, I don't know if it's, I don't see the connection, but it could be there. But really, audit advisory is meant to be, again, the community voice in that audit findings of the financial statements of the district, not necessarily what the CIP dollars are for, but there's definitely a connection. I don't discredit that.
That, or maybe it's just a report, if that's the
Right.
case, not to reinvent the wheel. But I know when, like, a school's audited, nobody, once that audit's done, even though it's public information, they don't even post it on the school website, so you can't even go to see what was done. I'm just thinking if there's something that impacted CIP, at least say, hey, an audit was done internally and X, Y, and Z came out, so the committee was informed of that part of it, just as a suggestion. And then I don't understand the at-large vacancies. Why do we, the process for identifying candidates for membership and filling at-large vacancies when they occur, is that our job? I mean, I don't know.
Where are you reading that?
On the old bylaws, page 2, section 5, A through E. And maybe that's necessary because this board sees people from other walks of life that you can then recommend those backgrounds, but I just wasn't sure why that was in the bylaws for.
My understanding was that it was a way of getting specific expertise that wasn't
reflected.
Wasn't also bound by geographical limitations.
Okay.
So that we could have Dave, as an example, Chad Conrad as a financial expert. It didn't matter what district he lived in. He had relevant expertise for this committee. So he was an at-large appointment.
Okay. So then I would suggest if that language stays, that you change shall in the first, second sentence to may, because that's pretty dictatorial as to, for identifying candidates for membership and filling at-large vacancies when they occur shall be as follows. I think we're more an advisory group, and maybe it should be may rather than shall. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members that would like to discuss any possible changes or recommendations? Anybody online? I haven't really heard from anybody online other than Ms. Blackman. Anybody here present?
Yeah, I have a suggestion.
Go ahead, Mr.
And maybe this has already been tried, so forgive me. This is almost like a complete rewrite from what I see. So it seems like if we did this in phases, maybe we could get some approvals done. Maybe have one approval for all the grammar, right? Just have that as a separate, like show all the grammar changes, and then show all the ones where it's the important issues like liaison and facilitators, things that are new to the bylaws. Maybe we can improve that. And then all these changes where you're removing and adding all new changes, maybe that should be a different type of vote. That's just a suggestion.
Okay, are any other members have any suggestions or discussion when it pertains to changes of bylaws?
I have one just additional one. It's just
Go
kind
ahead,
of going
Chris.
with what he's saying. On page 4 of the current bylaws, not the red line, under section 2, I would say change the word employ a consultant to contract with a consultant, because they're not employees. And that may be more of a language change, Dave.
So instead of construction, you're saying put what instead of construction?
Instead of, my earlier one was on page 2, G, construction and safety, or OSHA or something along those lines. Right now, I'm on page 4, and I'm saying section 2, strike the word may employ, but may contract, because isn't that how it would work, Brandon? A contract would be brought forth?
I don't think we're looking at the same copy.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't see it either.
maybe I've got the old one.
You said page 4, right? Okay, are you talking about site selection? You're talking about-
It's Article 4, Section 2.
Thank you.
I see where you're talking
See
about.
where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Article 4.
And
Section
actually,
On
to your
page 3.
point, Chris, that was something that
page
we had
4.
looked at in support of what Yvette was saying earlier, which was that idea of when we could have third parties present to the Bond Oversight Committee in order to make recommendations. So that was an area that we looked at changing the language more broadly in order to give Bond Oversight Committee more authority to seek out subject matter experts. And so that is an area that we've talked about in the past. Whether we go to employ or contract, I think is a part of it, but more broadly, I think there is a question of what authority Bond Oversight Committee has to bringing in subject matter experts, if they want to hear on, particular topics.
I apologize. I had printed this off 6 months ago, so that's what I was working off of, and I should have grabbed a copy on the paper, so I apologize.
Okay, committee members, is there any other more discussion pertaining to changes in bylaws?
Al?
Go
I,
ahead.
I was wondering if we could have a quick discussion on something that I think would be helpful for everybody to understand, myself as well. And some of this is probably going to be to Chris, and some of this is probably going to be to Brandon. I noticed in this original version, we have these liaisons, right? My understanding is that these liaisons served a purpose in 1999 when this was created, because of where the district was at that time, the limited resources that the district had at that time in terms of staff, in terms of experts within construction and facilities and that sort of thing. And now here we are many, many years later. The district has changed tremendously. Our budget has changed tremendously. Our staffing has changed tremendously. So then we go into the red line version and we see that Lola had wanted to remove all of the liaisons and kind of change the, I don't know if structure is the right word or the spirit of the board or the committee is the right word, but they wanted to make those changes because of these changes, that it's not, that this committee doesn't serve at the same capacity that it did when it was created. That was my understanding when I was reading through these two. I would like to hear, and it may create more discussion, I don't know, but I would like to hear so that I can better understand exactly what these liaisons would do at this capacity now versus what they were originally created for. And I would like to hear from Brandon as well on how that affects the district when you have these liaisons versus having a committee that serves more at a different capacity, more like the red line version, because I know you've read it too. So I just kind of want to hear from both to understand the original intent versus where we are now and what will serve the bigger purpose for our bond oversight.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to add points to what our trustee has brought up when it comes to liaisons? Just myself speaking, I remember that when this topic first came up months ago, probably almost a year ago, the people that served this board previously were adamant clearly that they saw the importance of the liaison positions. Personally, I thought the voice for each of the specialties that these people do for a living is valuable. Their expertise in that particular field, I see value in that. So I'm one of the people that support keeping the liaison position in play for that purpose, because having the opinion of someone that does something in a particular field that is very, very valuable to this board, I think is priceless. But I will leave that open to Ms. Williams. You want to say something?
I was going to let Brandon go, but he's hesitating, so I'm going to jump in. Thank you. One of the benefits that I have seen from our liaisons, the structure, the way that it is with the liaisons is, and I'm open to exploring other solutions, but one of the things that the liaisons really has been helpful with as a member of this committee is we can't accomplish or maybe even begin to understand what questions we should be asking facilities and staff to better help us be informed and knowledgeable around certain things. So I'll take, for example, construction, and recommendations and ideas on school design. Okay, something like that, because we've changed prototypes and things. Having that liaison be able to go and drill down and dig down a little deeper and better understand, and then come and share that information with us, because we can't always get that level of information from staff. Not that they're refusing to give it to us, it's a time issue. They're busy doing their jobs. And so having that liaison has been very helpful, I know for me and many others, being able to help us better understand, navigate, make suggestions, maybe some other ideas, throw some other ideas out. And that was just one of the many, many, many examples of how the liaison has helped us do our work. One of the struggles going on the opposite side has been if the liaison is not giving us that feedback or communicating back to the committee. Maybe there's information that they feel isn't important, or, because it's like second nature to them, whereas to me, that might be very valuable and informative information, So I would say, just coming from that standpoint from the liaison, is that, wanting to really understand all the nuts and bolts. So I think the liaison serves a role in helping us better understand, because then we're not having to call Brandon or meet with Brandon or one staff. We can call Robert, for example, and ask a question, because we know that you're knowledgeable about that, and you've met with, or have you met? And there have been times where Brandon has even suggested, hey, talk with, Rob was just here, or blah, 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 and he could probably answer that better for you. And so, in that regard, so.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anyone else on the board who would like to discuss liaisons, the importance of it?
Question. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Comment.
Oh, go ahead. I'll wait.
Mr. Goins?
I would just like to concur with others have said. I look at the liaison as like they're kind of boots on the ground. They're kind of the expertise or subject matter expertise that can bring it back to us. And an old term I like to use is put it where the goats can get it. And so they just tell us exactly what it is, and then it allows us to expand our conversation with the board and others in resolving some matters. So I think we'd be doing a disservice to get rid of the liaisons.
Thank you, Mr. Goins. Mr. Rob Gertison, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the sentiment that seems to be a collective thought that the liaisons do serve a very important role. And I think for me, what it does is it's a division of labor. There's a lot to really consider in the roles that we have as a committee. And for me, and I'll echo what Yvette was just saying, for me, design, I've been involved as an architect working on prototypes, probably since the late 90s. And to see, where it's evolved from where it was to where it is now, I have, as a design liaison, I have a lot of knowledge that I can, bring to, the future prototypes. And the feedback that I have, or the experience that I've had with staff has actually been, very, very encouraging from, since when I saw, being on the other side of the fence, being an architect, working for the school district, now being, somebody that can actually judge and give some feedback. Being on both sides of the fence, I think having the liaisons be able to dig deeper into those details are really, really important and very paramount to this committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gertison. Do you guys want to say anything about?
Question, just to follow up. Then.
Go ahead, Chris.
It seems to me that having people that are even more expertise, because when the board is supposed to pick people, some of us are supposed to have backgrounds in certain areas, right? So it sounds like you then maybe just explain to me what the process is for a liaison. Like, is somebody a liaison sitting out here in the audience? Are they appointed by the board and then they weigh in on these sections that are outlined here?
The board, actually, the chair appoints the liaisons historically, with the opinion of facilities, and so moving forward, it'll be totally up to Gina who she wants to appoint for certain liaisons.
Okay, so
It's the board.
she selects, or the chair currently in the
With
bylaws,
recommendations
selects people
from the-
from those background areas, and then they work with staff, I'm assuming, and then report back to us?
No, Brandon McLaughlin for the record, so they are committee members with those backgrounds that fill those roles.
Got
So
it.
if
So
one of
like
you-
Dave has background in X, so that's where he then reports back. So you glean from what we put into play as far as background, and you use your own committee members then to amplify that, is what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense to me. Maybe it's just how we structure the language to flow into that part of it. For example, did anybody ever provide to this board the interim study that was done on school design where we recommended, and I was chair, that daylighting had to be included in all schools, for example? And if not, I'll find the study for you.
Yeah, Brandon McLaughlin for the record hasn't been in my time, so if
Okay.
one
Yeah,
exists,
it was
I'd
back
be
in the
glad to
90s.
have, to present that about you.
I'm getting old. I'll find that study, because there may have been other elements that were there, but daylight, because we did in-depth with expertise, such as all of you, and said, tell us how a school really should be designed. And daylighting was a number one thing that came up, and I know most of our schools incorporate that, but I don't know if they all do within their design. So there may be other legislative factors that we probably should be aware of as well, and that should be referenced in the bylaws, that we make sure we include legislative changes that are out there.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any more discussion when it talks about the importance of liaisons or lack thereof for
Yes,
liaisons?
if I may,
Go ahead,
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, and where the question started from trustee Stevens. I mean, I think that the draw was, Brandon, what's your thoughts about it? And so I'm relatively neutral on liaison positions. Am I adverse to interactions with members of the public? Absolutely not. We welcome people to want to be involved in what the design of it is. I just want to go, maybe the history I'm aware of, and I'm two knowledge bases in the room, can probably share more of it, but just what I was able to ascertain is, yes, in the 1990s, the bond program was very robust, and we were building so rapidly. So what's been conveyed to me was we needed people on this committee to be localizing their resources and expertise so that we didn't go off the tracks. So I think to one member's point, yes, it served a purpose at one point. I think then you look at the governance policy 14 that was adopted as early as a year after the bylaws were put into place, but likely there was amendments along the way that added some of the language. But the one that Ms. Blackman-Taylor read out, that they're not to help or advise the staff, I think by de facto, it basically eliminated liaison positions just in a black and white sense. Whether I think they're valid or not is a separate argument, but that's the black and whiteness I'm seeing of it. And then just my own personal experiences with the liaisons that maybe shares their effectiveness. Again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying here's my experiences with them, is that when we've had them and they were working more robustly prior to Trustee Brooks making the changes we did and we try to curb a few of those staff interactions, there was definitely conversations that were out of scope, which then creates problems. So we have, this isn't targeted at any specific individual, but a construction liaison that's talking about things outside of construction, of what's specifically referenced as their liaison responsibilities, is what's then they're turning around and trying to help or even borderline direct staff. That became an issue. And then the flip side of that, liaisons were having those meetings, and they would be multi-hour meetings where we're providing a lot of robust information that would answer a lot of responses from the committee members. And during the committee, the liaison update portions of the agenda, it was, yeah, we met. So then the full committee is not getting the full breadth of what that interaction was. So if we were to, we want to provide the most amount of information to all members of the committee. And I don't know that the current liaison structure allows that based upon just the precedent we have with those liaison positions. So if the liaisons were to stay, I think there's a heavy modification necessary of how they're more effective. That does comply with GP 14, and I don't believe this is it at the moment.
Thank you, Brandon. I just want to follow up on that a little bit because one of the reasons I asked that question is because when I was reading through some of these liaison roles, there was definitely some stuff in here, like even the design liaison representative under Section C. It says that they're supposed to suggest design modifications and value engineering studies to be completed by, as appropriate, school district staff. So that immediately is in contradiction to our policy where the BOC is making recommendations, not speaking directly with staff on what they should or should not be doing. So to Brandon's point, I think that everything that you all have said is awesome. You love the liaisons. It's your committee. So if you want to keep the liaisons and you think that it's really helpful, I think that's great. But I do think from the bylaws perspective, my recommendation as your trustee liaison and making sure that it's in accordance to our policies would be that you really take a look at some of the verbiage under these liaison representatives because there are some operational things on here that isn't, it's not worded in such a way, some of them are, but there are parts that are not worded in a way where you're making recommendations to the trustees. It is, you are talking to staff, which is contradicting policy. So I do think that if we're going to keep the liaisons in the bylaws, I think that's great, but I do think, to Brandon's point, there's going to have to be a real hard look at some of the verbiage to ensure that there's recommendations. And then also to Brandon's point, I think it's a great idea to maybe take a look at the agenda as well so that a liaison is able to give a real briefing on what they've been able to do during that month or during, any meetings or whatever questions they've asked. And then the committee, makes their recommendation to the trustees. So I think that there's a lot of great stuff here that it's just some tweaks that'll get us where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going to your point, and Brandon, your point as well, I think some of this language in here, and I agree with you, because we're not to instruct staff, but I think that this is more related to evaluate and make recommendations to the committee, not to staff. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. And that's been my experience on this committee, has been, because Rob has come back and has had some great, you've evaluated, and you've made some great recommendations to the committee to consider and why he feels that way. And that's been helpful informing us in making a recommendation to the board. The problem has been is we've not been able to really, that connection to the board. So to make that recommendation to the board to move that policy forward or that procedure for that recommendation, that's where we've been lacking. And so I really love when you talked about that mechanism, right? So that the work that we're doing translates over. And so I'm real excited about that. I'm real excited about where we're going here now because it's actionable, and I'm all about the action. But I just wanted to clarify that, just because the audience, those who might be watching, that's how I have pretty much read this. But I'm with you as far as I think we're tweaking some of this wording so that it's clearer in that regard. So I just wanted to add that little bit.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. All excellent points. I think there's still a role for a liaison. So for example, who serves as our design person right now? Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you. That said, there may be one or two things that really you should be able to glean and bring back to us before it goes to anybody else. And so it's not clear, because if I look at on the design side, you are the liaison and conduit for principals, teachers, students, as well as architectural consultants. I don't even know if you have access to the schools to be able to do that part of it, right? So there may be things that were from when we initially started. It may be one line that still defines what that liaison does, but it always should come back to here, inform staff, and come back to here before it moves into the outer world in any way, shape, or form. Because like even on site selection and land use, work with district staff to develop, modify over time site selection methodology and geographic areas. Whoever our site selection person, and do they do that with you, Brandon? I don't see that as a board member they'd have that role.
So Brandon McLeod, for the record, David Flatt, I believe, is our current site selection. He does work with Chris Stingler, our Director of Real Property.
Okay, so you
Equity.
do have that role.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, because land use, having been a commissioner, planning and land use and zoning are insane, and I still don't understand it completely after 12 years, right? So you want to make sure that you're always anticipating where growth is going to come in, but also where there's decreases. And I know the trustees are having to deal with that, with the lessening of population. Are there ways to repurpose facilities? Are there ways to redo it by age groupings? Are there things, and that David's recommendations with staff, but then bring it back to this board for discussion, and maybe that's where it gets agendized in a certain way. So maybe I would ask of the liaisons that are on this board currently, go through that laundry list and see if it should only be 1 or 2 items, and have a recommendation that comes back to us as far as what your role really should be, rather than getting involved with the staffing component, if that makes some sense.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Just one quick, just piggybacking off of that, using that same example of develop a recommended schedule. I also want to be clear too, is what seems to be our method of operation, or the way that we do our work, is we want to engage and develop maybe an idea, a thought, or a process, or whatever, with staff, because last thing we want to do is recommend something to the trustees that may harm or create more of a problem or effectiveness of the staff. So oftentimes it's a collaboration back and forth of, oh, this won't work, or those, because I know there's been those times where we thought this was a great idea, and then we hear from staff that, no, and this is why, and then we have to backtrack and think, oh, well, maybe we go a different route on that. And so I think some of this wording, I think, goes to that as well, is developing something with staff. And so I think, going to your point, I think it's important that we be a little clearer in the language.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anyone on the board that want to discuss more options when it comes to liaisons, the pluses or the minuses?
Would the liaisons be willing to take a look at the language currently and see what needs to still be there or not, or what should be excluded? Because if I even go back to design, suggest design modifications and studies to be completed as appropriate by district staff. Again, that's not our role. And so that language would need to be modified, in my opinion. So maybe you could go through, for those of you that are representing construction design, there may be things we need to add. So there's some things you may want to take off, but there may be some things now in the new world. Where's solar at, as David said? You know, what's our policy on that? How should we be constructing for those components? So there may be some other things that are out there.
No, I'd agree with that. Anybody that, everyone's got some homework to do. Look over what your duties are on these liaisons and bring these suggestions to the board, or bring it to the executive board, so we can discuss and what we can do to clean up this language when it comes to liaisons. Go ahead, Gina.
I love this discussion, so I'm glad that we are having it. And I think in some ways it's able to be a little bit more robust, away from a sense of taking away something from the Bond Oversight Committee. There is a legitimate concern about the length of our meetings, which that was as far as I understand, another reason for having these liaison roles. As Brendan has said, it often includes extra meetings. Sometimes they can be quite lengthy. So I do, whether that's in the language or in that intent, one of the things that we tried to solve as we moved away from what would a bylaw look like without a liaison role. What we were doing was also trying to push some of these elements of our responsibilities back to the full committee so that we could see the designs of these schools as a full committee versus getting a report on them in terms of the liaison roles. And that issue of time is really became one of the things that was really the practical roadblock to why it would be challenging to get rid of the liaison roles entirely, was whether or not as a committee we would really have the ability to dive as deeply into all of these various topics. So I love the idea that we might be able to find a compromise that adjusts the language of the liaison roles into a way that comports with GP 14 in its current version, while being mindful of what that time obligation is for Bond Oversight Committee, but really strengthening that reporting out so that it becomes a mechanism for the Bond Oversight Committee to understand the greater complexities that are facing them with any of these recommendations. So I would absolutely support any of these liaison roles coming back and taking a look more specifically at these language. I do have a question though, because people are referencing this redlined version. That staff section was taken directly from AZAC. A question to staff: do they find it helpful to have their roles and responsibilities the way that Emily seems supportive of having the liaison role broken down for her that way? Is it useful to kind of consider keeping that red line version of staff facilitator role?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. My only hesitation with that, I'm not adverse to accountability in another fashion, but I do have a job description that also dictates how well I do in my job. So I would be fearful that this could overlap or contradict any job descriptions through the HR process of the district as well.
I see. So does AZAC conflict with that as well?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the AZAC one, but
It's literally was just taken off of AZAC's bylaws, but
Right.
if it's not helpful or useful, I don't have a particular passion for that.
Yeah, AZAC could be wrong, and I don't know that. They may be subject to the same level of scrutiny here shortly if we find that it's out of compliance. But
If it's
we're
not
just-
useful, it's not useful.
yeah.
But then Chris, your point about the 11 versus 15, do you see a desire to make these changes now, or do you think it's worth it to wait until the non-voting members of the Board of School Trustees have voting authority?
I would probably say wait, but I would say that as you structure your bylaws in anticipation of a voting coming in, you may not need as much of this language right now. That's all, just for the length of trying to figure out what they're talking about. But I do think, yes, you stick with, I just don't know, what's our current size of our committee? Is it 15?
I believe
14,
so.
15 in that
Wow.
area.
Okay.
And then when you were talking about OSHA, you mean safety in terms of that construction safety piece, not safety and security of schools.
Correct. It was just construction,
Right.
including safety is maybe the better
Including
terminology.
safety, yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to, because I do have a recommendation, Al, and maybe that's, and whether you want to try and do it in this meeting is sort of appoint a small group that can really bring language back in the next meeting that can perhaps reflect these comments.
You're talking
To the one point, I'm not sure who brought it up, maybe doing it in sections, maybe that committee can also decide what they think would be passable in the immediate term, and then consider longer term changes
Are you
later.
proposing putting a subcommittee together, or are we talking still the executive board to discuss bylaws?
Your call, whatever you think is, I think.
I'm just trying to understand what your point was. right
We've
now.
we've had it as an executive committee before, but it seems as if maybe there's a desire to have a a slightly different group involved with that. I don't know what the appetite is for it. So I'm willing to hear what people would accept.
Okay, then on the floor is, we're trying to get everyone's opinion is to create a subcommittee to discuss bylaws, or just leave it up to the executive board and bring recommendations to the board? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Yvette Williams, I'd like to see the executive board, but also include other members of this body, because this larger document that was done with just the executive board and the trustee, or liaison trustee, and then it wasn't supported by the committee. And so I think it's important that we have other voices there at that table regarding the bylaws, so that we get better support, and we're not having to keep going back and forth. So that would be my suggestion.
Go ahead, Mr. Filippo.
Yeah, David Filippo. Yeah, I'd just suggest that we maybe propose two different bylaw changes in the next meeting. One is those that we think we can agree on, and let's get some things approved. And then those that are controversial or that we disagree on, that we have further discussion. But I don't think we'll ever get all of this approved in one motion if we don't separate it.
True. Any other discussion pertaining to committees? Go ahead, Mr. Halsey.
I make a recommendation that the new chair appoint, with the executive committee, the new chair appoint 2 other people to the bylaws committee to try to get input, and we'll leave it up to the new chair to select who that is, and maybe we can get the ball rolling on this.
Is that that's a motion or a recommendation, or? Well, go ahead, David.
Thank you. Dave Flatt, for the record, I agree with you. I think that's a splendid idea to get us going.
Any other discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Halsey.
I don't think it needs to be a motion. It's just a recommendation, and the new chair can accept to do it or not.
Okay, Gina.
I think it's a great recommendation. I suppose, since I am not there, if we want to have a conversation in terms of who is interested in doing that sort of more in-depth homework, I'd like to hear who those voices are.
Is there anyone on the committee that wishes to be the 2 suggested appointees on top of the executive board and the trustee at this point?
Yvette Williams, I'd like to throw my name in the hat.
Okay, Yvette Williams, anybody else? Mr. David Flatt? Okay, anybody else? We have Williams, we have Mr. Flatt, wanting to be on this subcommittee or to add on to the executive board. Is there anybody else interested? Anybody else interested? Hearing none, so as the current chair, I'll go ahead and let's put this committee together. It's going to be the executive board, the trustee, along with Ms. Yvette Williams and Mr. Flatt, to discuss upcoming changes in the bylaws. Is there any other discussion we want to do when it comes to pertaining to bylaw changes from the board? Go ahead,
I would
Chris.
ask our trustee liaison if she could provide, if she wants to participate, fine, but if you would provide notes of where, on the red line, where you thought that might be clearer as a trustee that we should maybe look at entertaining, that would be very helpful then. Thank you.
And I just would like to thank everyone for having the discussion today, so that we can feel like we're moving a little closer to the end of this, process.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion from the board pertaining to upcoming changes in the bylaws? Hearing none, we do have a public comment. Mr. Fred Smith, would you please come up and discuss your topic of bylaw review as well? Thank you, sir. The floor is all yours.
For the record, my name is Fred Smith. For those of you that are new to the committee, by way of background, I am the Brandon McLaughlin from the 1990s. And I am the person who was the assistant superintendent for facilities when the original bylaws were created. I can't begin to tell you how frustrating it is to sit out there in the audience and hear some of the questions that are asked, and I have some of the answers, and I can't say a word. To answer one of the questions is, the Bond Oversight Committee was formed right after the 1988 bond measure was passed. So it was the early 90s that it was formed, and I've been attending bond oversight committees since 1991, when I was first employed by the district. The whole concept of liaisons came about because the entire bond oversight committee realized they could not do the job in 1 hour a month during their lunch hour. That's why your meetings are at 11:30. During their lunch hour, from some of the captains of industry of Las Vegas, if you look at some of the original members of the Bond Oversight Committee and who they were. They could not do it in 1 hour, and they also realized they couldn't do it as a committee of the whole. And so from the very beginning, they discussed the concept of establishing subcommittees, ironically, for such things as construction, design, community relations, site selection. And at the time, I'm not sure that it's changed, it was decreed that you couldn't have a subcommittee that wasn't also subject to the open meeting law. And they realized that was not going to work. And that is how the concept of liaisons came to be. A single person or persons, one and a backup, appointed by the chairman of the Bond Oversight Committee to look in depth into those very things that you've been discussing today. There is no doubt that with the changes in how the board operates now and how the Bond Oversight Committee operates now, there need to be some changes to the bylaws. But the concept of liaisons, I don't think you as a committee can do what needs to be done as a committee of the whole. And you can't have a subcommittee unless it is subject to the open meeting law. I'm not even sure if the subcommittee you just appointed is not subject to the open meeting law. I would also, it was October, I believe, of last year that this subject first hit you as an agenda item. And it was in November, and I believe if you look at the minutes of the November meeting is when I first stood up here before you and voiced some concerns, and so did Joyce Haldeman. And some other members of former Bond Oversight Committee members, and those are all attached as minutes of your November 19th Bond Oversight Committee meeting. I would encourage you, particularly the new members, to go back and look at the minutes of the November 19th, 2024 Bond Oversight Committee meeting and look at some of the suggestions and recommendations that we made to you at that time. And I'm sure my 3 minutes are up.
Yeah, you're perfect. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
And Mr. Chair, could I just acknowledge Fred? He implemented the bond rollover concept that I had that we passed into law and really helped make it. We were the fastest growing school district at that time, and every elementary school, we needed one a month, allegedly, right, Fred? And this bond committee, because I put in state law the facilities committee, so at least the local governments and other people were keeping an eye on. But this is really intended to be the workhorse in the long run for making sure that we were aware of backing up staff and knowing what barriers that they were running into. So I just wanted to acknowledge Fred for all those years of service that he did.
Thank you. Your time and knowledge is greatly appreciated, sir. Thank you. I would like to go to legal, though, and ask the legalities of what we just did before. You know the question, so.
Subcommittees are subject to the open meeting law. No, not necessarily. So the subcommittee would constitute its own membership. So it would be subject to, if there's 3 that are being appointed as part of the subcommittee, the quorum would be those 3. So it would be a majority of those 3.
Executive committee then posted as far as if they get together for the 3 of them to work on something?
The executive committee has been not deemed to be an actual subcommittee for purposes of deliberation and discussion.
Okay. So we could, as the executive committee could ask for others from the board to participate with us from time to time with regard to the bylaws change without.
No. Then we would be walking into the issue of a walking quorum. Yes.
Oh, I've seen those, believe me.
Okay, then.
But given
So-
this work, if
Go ahead.
we agendize and have a meeting as a subcommittee, that is still, would be permissible.
Yes.
So the group can exist, we just have to agendize our conversations and have them be in publicly available.
Correct. I mean, I think originally the idea behind having this before the full committee is to have that robust deliberation and discussion, rather than having it more individualized. And my understanding was that the executive was working with the trustee liaison in order to ensure compliance with, or ensure that the recommendations were being in conformity with the governance policies. So the discussion was a little bit different than the creation of a subcommittee for purposes of reviewing and providing recommendations to the Bond Oversight Committee on these bylaws.
So our options would be to maintain it as an executive committee, have this conversation, bring back changes to the Bond Oversight Committee as a whole to be voted on and talked about, or look for a way to have agendized meetings with a small subcommittee.
Correct.
So what they're saying is basically all the notes, the suggestions that were given today throughout this meeting will be taken to the executive board along with the trustee to discuss what we can do to clean this language up and take everyone's suggestion. But just the executive board, for legality purpose, just the executive board and the trustee at this point then. Am I correctly stating this legal?
If that's the decision that the board is making.
I'm up to hear people's opinion on this, but we got to keep this legal, so it doesn't sound like we're in the realms of being legal, putting up a subcommittee of 5. And point taken is, I mean, we're still going to get your points of view. The executive board is still going to value for all the points that were given today. So just to keep it legal, I personally would suggest to leave it the way we had it before, keep ourselves out of trouble. But I'm open for everyone to speak up on this topic, please.
I think people can just provide their input to you. Everybody's read the document or looking over the document. If we know it's just the executive committee can meet, then they'll send it to the chair and he can distribute it or distribute to the other vice chair and second chair. So everybody can still participate and put their ideas forward. We just won't meet and we'll be following the law.
Thank you, Mr. Halsey. Anybody else want to say anything pertaining to this particular topic?
I would say that for ease, making an executive committee makes sense. However, given what we have had happen, I am also in support of the extra work if people want to do that would make it a public agendized meeting. So I want to show a sense of flexibility towards opening that up to actually making it a subcommittee and having it be a part of that public process. However, I do understand and acknowledge that does mean more time consideration and more hassle. So I am up for that if that is what this committee decides to do. But for ease, if they decide to keep it to the executive committee, I am open to that as long as we understand that that's why it becomes the committee presenting the bond oversight, the bylaws.
Is there any other questions or comments pertaining to this topic? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I am fine with whatever you decide, Madam Chair. So if you, for sake of time and convenience for all of you, because I know all of you also work, except one person who's retired. So if you prefer for us to send our suggestions in, the only issue, I'd like to get some better clarification or some rules, some guidelines on how we do that, because I don't want to take a bunch of time in formulating and, where I think there should be some changes when that's something you guys have already addressed. So, you know what I mean? So, whereas if we're in a meeting together, that's a conversation, and so you kind of know, oh, okay, we got that. So I would just want to have more guidance from you if you choose to keep it the way that it is. so that, for our purposes.
The problem with that is I know when we did this before, even having a working Google Doc being shared violated open meeting law.
Question, but people could send in from this committee comments or notes to the executive committee.
Yes, they can send in, what we were told before was that they could send in an email to Al as the chair. But what Yvette was saying is that her issue was not knowing whether or not that language was already talked about or reviewed. And wanting more guidelines.
By the work group, so you wouldn't know, Yvette,
She
whether or
wouldn't
not
be
it was
best case
at least discussed and recognized. Okay.
Gotcha. Is there any other opinions, discussion pertaining to what we did illegally, basically?
Can I ask how we all communicate with each other as it is? Do we? Oh, we don't?
Not really much.
Well, I want everybody, I have a personal cell phone I'll give to everybody, but I'd like everybody
I
else's
think
contact.
legally we can't.
We legally can't.
That's-
Interesting.
Well, we can have, Chris, you and I can have and as executive committee, we can have a conversation.
Got it.
But in terms of looping everyone in or texting or trying to communicate that way, those were some of the stumbling blocks that we already came upon, that it's, to not even reply all in our confirming our attendance in the meeting. So we can, as an executive committee, we communicate via text and email.
Okay.
Noting that those are still publicly available things if they are requested. But no, I can't send out an email to Yvette and Rob and, hey, say, what do you guys think about this language?
As long as it doesn't violate the
Go ahead, Mr.
open meeting law, but you also have quorum that is defined, because even at the county commission, if I talked to one or two persons, as long as I never went over the threshold that made a quorum. So that's.
And that we don't get into a walking quorum where I
Right.
talk to you
Right.
and then I talk to Rob, even if they're in separate conversations.
So for Yvette's question, does it make sense to have the e-board first take everything we've discussed today, tell everybody, get us notes in 2 weeks? And then we meet, flush it out, and we keep whatever documents come from and have a rationale when we report back to the board as to why one area was entertained and another one was not, but the board still has that decision. Does that make some sense then? So maybe
makes
that's less
sense.
time for staff to have to post and deal with that part of it. We can keep it small, but everybody has information they can share further than what we did today.
I think in that case, you're running a very fine line on a walking quorum if every member is providing input, and arguably that's a deliberation that's being exchanged.
So let me go to, for example, my question on like the design person, the site selection person. Can they at least give us recommendations, what to strike, what to add, what to change?
I think the idea would be to do that in an open meeting. So if there is that person, for them to provide that input in an open meeting.
So we won't be able to do as in-depth as what David Filippo's saying, but we might be able to get the language changes, things where we are not controversial, bring that back. Then the board could also then at that time say, hey, I'm a design person, I recommend A, G, and D in the open meeting be deleted, and I want to add this language. So then we could take that up, and then we could formulate a secondary recommendation.
Yes, and I would just note that the Bond Oversight Committee is providing a recommendation to the Board of School
Only,
Trustees.
correct.
Correct. So ultimately, those recommendations would have to be approved by the Board of School Trustees in order for them to become effective.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Filippo.
Yeah, so, I've been on a lot of boards and seen a lot of bylaw changes. I've just never seen a complete bylaw change like this. But, and it doesn't sound like we all even agree on, like, this deletes the actual liaisons that we have, and I'm not sure we want to do that. So we have a lot of discussion, it seems like we still need to do. So I would ask that, let's look at the things that we agree on, let's look at the grammar changes, let's look at those elements in here that need to be changed. And then in the future, instead of taking this all in one piece, maybe just do Article 1, unless we're on a time constraint, maybe we do Article 1, 2, and 3 one month, and Article 4, 5, 6 so that we can have a good discussion here at the board and figure out what it is we do agree on. But I think there's elements here that we all agree on, and we maybe focus on that for the next meeting.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Just wanted to add clarity to what you're looking at when we look at this red-lined document. The reason it's lined out is because it came before this body and we had discussions, and those were things that we decided we didn't want included. So what you're looking at is the latest, I guess, eyes on the our last discussion, most recent discussion of what the Bond Oversight Committee revisions for that red document. So.
Could, Mr. Chair,
Go
then,
ahead.
if that's the route we go, could staff, I hate to do this, give us the minutes that was referenced, that Fred referenced to review, and then the minutes from whenever this board entertained the previously redlined documents, so we know what your concerns were that we, or should we just throw that one out and start over, and except for some points from trustee Stevens that has that we wanted to maybe keep?
These
I do
lines,
have
these
all
lines,
of-
these lines happen several different
Oh,
times, so
okay.
it wouldn't be just in one meeting.
Got it.
That's what
Okay.
I'm saying. This has been ongoing for a good 2 years.
Gina has everything.
As executive committee, I'm looking here at 6 different versions of the bylaws.
As long as somebody has them within the
With
work.
comments and meetings. So I'm more than happy to deep dive with that, with you, Chris.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hale.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the February, or the November meeting minutes can be found in the April meeting materials, the April 24, because we hadn't met since that November meeting. So when we came back in April, which was my first meeting, there's the notes in there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's just part of it, but like I said, Gina has all 6 revisions at this point, but point well given. Is there any other discussion when it comes to bylaw reviews, changes, et cetera, et cetera?
It
Here we-
appears that there's an appetite for just keeping it the executive committee. David and Yvette, is that something that, or would you prefer us to just push forward and look to agendize these meetings?
I'll speak on it.
Go ahead.
I think we go back to the executive committee. I think it would tie up too much time for staff as well as committee members to try to do it on an open meeting agenda type setup. So just keep it as executive committee, and let's try to get something done so we didn't waste all the time we just spent today talking about it.
Any
And as
other
I mentioned-
discussion?
And as
Go
I
ahead, Will.
mentioned previous, Gina, I'm on board with whatever you decide. So that's your decision as chair, and we'll honor that decision, at least I will.
I would say, and Al can be he's the chair for now, that the final, I would push for the expedited version of this where we just meet as an executive committee, but I would really then like to present language at the July meeting that can actually be voted on.
Do we even have a July meeting that are we aware of?
Oh, I suppose then the August meeting.
Usually it's dark in July annually, so just keep that in mind. We'll have to postpone it till August. So, I would concur with Gina. Let's keep it how it was with the executive committee plus the trustee here, so we can move forward and go from there and keep it legal as well. So, is there any other discussion when it comes to bylaws, changes, upgrades, whatever the case may be, from the committee? Hearing none, we're finally going to move on to 3.01, public comment. Is
Did we have a 2.03C? You said to add in our agenda?
that was it. Pardon? We discussed, that was discussed already with them. Yeah. So that was part of the discussion, I should say. Okay, moving on to 3.01, public comment. Is there anyone here, public, who would like to say something? Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
In in the grand scheme of things, this is pretty minor, but I've always believed that words are important, that words matter, and the words that you use, you need to use very cautiously. It's happened several times for the past several months. It's happened here again today. This is a committee, not a board. Several times people use the term "this board." I would just remind everybody that this is a committee, and it's an executive committee, not an executive board.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Point well taken. Is there any other public comment? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I just wanted to find out, for sake of the public that may be watching, I understand that there's going to be a meeting July 4th related to turf, and I was hoping that our trustee liaison could share that information for those who may want to attend.
It's possible that it will be on the work session, which is July 2nd, but I don't want to confirm because the agenda hasn't come out yet.
Okay.
When the agenda comes out, you'll know if it's on there.
Okay, so I'll just look for that.
Yes,
I didn't
ma'am.
know, I thought maybe it was a special meeting or something.
It's a
Because
work session.
on a Wednesday.
We have a work session on July 2nd.
On a Wednesday, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment from the public or the board? Okay, we're moving on to, actually, just keep in mind, we are dark July, so there will be no meeting in July, and that'll give the executive board and suggestions for the bylaws to put this into place, so give us time to do what we got to do, and hopefully we come with some clarity in August. But other than that, there's one motion left. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
Nikia Jackson Hell, for the record, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I have a motion on the floor from
And
Ms.
Yvette
Hill.
Williams seconds it. And Gina, have a wonderful vacation, and everybody else, have a safe vacation if you're going somewhere.
We have a motion on the floor and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.